Hello and welcome. This is Dawn. Today I have a fun one to share with you. Super quick, super easy, and it is no fail watercolor. I promise. Now this technique works great with both solid and lined images. Today I'm going to be using our newly released Just Breathe. And this set contains a large floral and bird image that is based on a continuous line drawing. It is a sketchy drawing, but it is perfect for this technique. I'm also going to be working on distress watercolor cardstock. I've trimmed this down to 4¼ by 3 inches, and I'm going to be using distress oxide in Lucky Clover, Crackling Campfire, and Ground Espresso. Now, I like using oxides for this technique, but it also works wonderfully with any water-soluble ink, the regular distress inks, the Hero Arts reactive inks, any dye ink that is water-based. I like to apply my ink with daubers. And I like doing it this way because I can selectively ink up areas of the stamp that I want with certain colors. Now, if you don't have daubers, you could take your ink pad directly to the stamp if you're not worried about getting the colors exactly in the right places. And trust me, once you add water, they're going to blend together some anyway, so don't fret. If you don't have daubers, go ahead and try this technique anyway. So here I am just, again, selectively selectively inking the stamp. And then I'm going to take a water bottle. I'm using the Distress Sprayer water bottle. And I'm going to spritz this with water a couple of times. I think for this one I used 3 quick bursts. The more water you use, the more watery your image is going to be. The less water you use, the more defined and crisp your impression is going to be. I like to do this on a stamp press. You could also use any block you want. You could even do this in your MISTI. But I like to use the Fisker stamp press for this because I like to be able to get in there and stamp and move quickly. Because as soon as I'm done stamping this down, I'm going to use a wet brush to move around some of that wet ink. And you'll be able to get several impressions with this, right? So you'll see I've stamped it down once on the right side there. And then I'm going to slightly turn the stamp and I'm going to stamp it again in the opposite corner. And I'm even going to stamp one more time down at the bottom just to create that little visual triangle. So you can see here I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want it to be positioned, and this is good. All right, so I'm going to clean up my work surface because you can see I've got some ink there, and then I have zoomed in. And now I'm just taking a wet paintbrush and I am lightly moving it around the image. You can see where there is more wet ink, it will move more, and areas where the ink is dry, it's going to move less. This is perfect to create that nice faux, well, it's watercolor. It's not really faux, it's watercolor. But doing it this way, you don't really have to think about it. You're putting down concentrated color in the areas of the image, and then you're just using that wet brush to help move that ink around a little more. Now this would work on any mixed media paper. It works wonderfully on this Distress watercolor cardstock, and you could try it on regular cardstock. You'll get a watery effect. The water just won't move quite as nicely as it does here. We have sizing on the paper here, which keeps the water on the surface and keeps the ink from soaking too quickly into the paper, which is why we're allowed to move that ink around with the water. So you can see here, I'm not doing anything really special, just kind of moving the brush around on a couple spots, and that's it. If you want to add more color, you could use your mat there. How I've got a mat over here on to the right there. You could squish out some extra ink, pick that up and add it in, but I didn't feel like this one really needed it. So I'm going to dry this down using my heat tool, or you could set this aside to dry naturally. Either way is fine. The faster you dry it, the less color mixing you're going to get. So if you want lots of color mixing, let it dry naturally. Now we're going to make a background to mat this on. I'm going to use what's left on the stamp. I have not re-inked it. I'm just adding more water to it. And I'm going to randomly stamp this all over the background. So you can see how much ink I still have. So again, the goal here is not to create anything legible. I just want a mat that is a washy combination of all of the colors that are in my focal point there, that are going to be on that top layer. Again, to kind of get rid of any visible pattern, I am going to continue to spray this with water and encourage those inks to run and move. And you can make this as watery and as washy as you want. It's really all up to you. And I could have stopped here, but I wanted it to be just a little bit heavier in color, and I just wanted to show you, how it looks when you do it with a script stamp. So I had this Tim Holtz Ledger script stamp sitting off to the side. I'm going to do the exact same thing, ink it up with the same colors, spray it with water, and then randomly stamp it around the background. Now, I don't have this panel completely dry yet because I want the old layer to mix with the new layer. And then once I'm done stamping this, I'm again going to spray it with water. I cannot tell you guys how much I love this technique, this watercolor stamping. Like I said in the title, this is no fail. I have done it with several stamps, both solid stamps and lined images, and it works great with all of them. I highly, highly encourage you to try this if you haven't tried it yet. And if you love the watercolor look but struggle with, results that you really love, trust me, try this. And it's going to look like a hot mess at first, but when it dries, it's like magic. I always, always am just amazed at how different watercolor looks once it dries. So just trust the process, just have fun, pick colors you love, and go to town. I will have several samples using this technique on my blog in the upcoming weeks. We just released 2 new stamp sets, this one, which is Just Breathe, and a solid silhouette of wildflowers that we also just released. Both sets work beautifully with this technique. So if you really enjoyed this, make sure to check the blog. It's blog.wplus9.com in the upcoming weeks for more samples of this technique, because I won't be making a video for all of them because the technique really is very simple and quick. Okay, so here I air dried it. I didn't air dry it. I dried it with a heat tool. You saw me do that. And then I'm just adding a few extra stamps on top for a contrast between the super watery and then a little bit of the text that's, you can tell it's text. All right, so we're gonna trim this down and use it as a mat. You can see here that it's just that burst of color in the background. So it doesn't matter that this is, it's busy. It's busy and it's heavy. But trust me, it looks good in the end. It's a perfect mat for this. And the extra scrap pieces I can use to cut die cuts from. So there is no waste here. See how pretty that's gonna be? Okay, so I also cut down a smaller white mat that's just 1/8 of an inch larger than my 3 by 4 1/4 piece here. And I'm gonna stitch around the edge. And then I'm also going to stitch around the edge of that watercolored mat there. But before we do that, we're gonna stamp our sentiment. And I'm gonna use the large friend here, along with the I was just thinking about you, also in this set. And this font is gorgeous. It complements this imagery beautifully. And there are 3 large sentiments in the set. You've got friend, friend. Oh my gosh. You've got friend, thank you, and breathe, which makes it a wonderful set for all year round. And the sub-sentiments are great encouraging sentiments and just heartfelt thank you messages. So I love this set. I'm stamping this in ground espresso oxide. I went for the dark brown to pull from the bird and then to ground the other brighter colors. And can we just talk a minute about this color combo? I had never used Lucky Clover before, and it is amazing paired with Crackling Campfire. You may already know this, but it was new to me, and I'm in love with it. In love with it so much that I had to make 2 of these cards. So as I mentioned, I'm going to add some stitching around the outer borders of both of these panels on my sewing machine. I'm not going to tape that part because it's kind of boring. So here are the finished cards. So you can see here that that machine stitching that I added on both the main panel and that mat, and adhered that to a white card base with some foam tape, and that was it. I love the way this faux watercolor turned out. I say I'm doing watercolor in air quotes over here because you saw me. I literally just moved the ink around with a wet paintbrush. So easy and so beautiful. Like I mentioned, I love the color combo so much, I had to do another version. This time I used the same visual triangle. I used the thank you, the world needs more of you from the set. And then instead of adding machine stitching this time, I used our 5x7 layers die to add a little panel there with some faux stitching on it. Popped that sentiment up on some foam tape and backed it with a little bit of vellum and some thread, and that was it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and give this technique a try. If you do, leave it in the comments. Don't forget, you can find all of the supplies used in today's video listed in the description below. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.